Professor, I don't understand. There must be some mistake in the data. The young Zaxri students' translucent appendages trembled as they manipulated the holographic display, their bioluminescent spots flickering with anxiety. Professor Kathra adjusted her sensory stalks, the equivalent of a human raising an eyebrow. And what exactly makes you think there's an error, student Melix? These readings, they're impossible. According to our research parameters, the human subject should have been incapacitated at least 17 different times during this observation period. But they just kept going? The xenobiology classroom at the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies was unusually quiet. Normally, the ambient sounds of 30 different species breathing, moving, and occasionally molting would create a pleasant background hum. Today, though, every being was focused intently on the presentation at the front of the room. Professor Kathra's epidermis shifted to a thoughtful shade of mauve. Ah, you've discovered what we in the field call the human paradox. Would you care to share your specific findings with the class? Melek's spots pulsed with embarrassment, but they straightened their posture appendages and faced their fellow students. Well, we were studying human pain tolerance and endurance metrics as part of our comparative xenophysiology project. We started with basic observational data from human recreational activities. The holographic display shifted to show a human female running what their species called a marathon. The biometric data scrolling alongside the image caused several students to emit distress pheromones. As you can see, Melix continued, their voice gaining confidence, the subject's muscle fibers are experiencing microtears. Lactic acid is building up in their system. Their core temperature is elevated, and they're actively depleting their body's energy reserves. By any reasonable standard, their nervous system should be overwhelming them with pain signals to force them to stop. A Vulpid student in the back raised a paw. But they're smiling? Exactly! Melix's spots flashed with excitement. Not only are they continuing despite clear biological indicators of damage, but they appear to be experiencing positive emotions. We thought this might be an anomaly, so we expanded our research. The display shifted through a rapid series of images. Humans participating in something called CrossFit, carrying heavy loads over long distances, engaging in ritualized combat sports, and even voluntarily submersing themselves in ice-cold water. In every case, Melix said, their voice rising with academic fervor, we observed humans pushing well past what should be their body's natural limits. But the truly fascinating part came when we started analyzing their social media archives. The next image showed a human with what appeared to be a broken limb, giving a thumbs-up gesture while smiling at a recording device. The medical diagnostic overlay caused several students to emit involuntary squeaks of horror. This human, Melix explained, not only continued their daily activities with multiple fractures, but appeared to take pride in sharing evidence of their injury with their social group. We found thousands of similar examples, often accompanied by something they call memes, making light of their condition. Professor Kathra's skin rippled with amusement. And what conclusions did your research team draw from this data? Melix's spots dimmed slightly. Well, initially we hypothesized that humans might simply have reduced pain sensitivity compared to other species. But their neurological scans show they have fully functioning pain receptors. They just seem to ignore them. Or worse, in some cases, they appear to actively seek out activities that trigger pain responses. The professor gestured with a sensory stalk. Can you give us an example? There's this activity called spicy food challenges. Melix brought up a new hologram, and several students immediately retracted their visual organs in distress. Humans willingly consume substances that trigger their pain receptors. They make their mouths feel like they're on fire, and they do it for fun. Some even compete to see who can endure the most pain. A collective shudder went through the classroom. A fainted student in the corner began to crystallize from stress. But surely, a crystalline being near the front chimed in, their resonance frequencies wavering with confusion. This behavior must be limited to a small subset of humans? Perhaps they're warriors or specialized athletes? Melix's spots pulsed in a pattern indicating negative response. That's what we thought too. But then we found evidence of ordinary humans doing extraordinary things in emergency situations. There are documented cases of parents lifting vehicles to rescue their offspring, individuals continuing to fight despite severe injuries, and even examples of humans surviving conditions that should be mathematically impossible. The holographic display showed a series of news headlines and medical records that caused several more students to emit distress signals. Professor Kathra stepped forward, Thank you, Melix. This brings us to a fascinating aspect of human physiology and psychology that has puzzled xenobiologists for generations. Humans possess something they call adrenaline, but that only partially explains their remarkable abilities. The true key seems to lie in their unprecedented capacity for what they term stubbornness or spite. The display shifted to show a human historical document. Consider this example from their medical archives. A human was attacked by one of their planet's apex predators, a grizzly bear. Despite suffering injuries that should have been immediately fatal, the human not only survived, but, according to the record, and I quote, was really angry about it and decided not to die out of sheer spite. A wave of incredulous murmurs swept through the classroom. "But Professor," a gelatinous student bubbled, "that defies all known laws of biology." Welcome to the fascinating field of human studies. Professor Cathra's skin shifted to a deep blue of academic excitement, where we regularly discover that our understanding of what is possible needs to be revised. Humans have an extraordinary ability to push beyond their physical limitations through sheer force of will, or as they sometimes put it, by being too stubborn to die. Melix's spots pulsed with a new pattern of understanding. That actually explains some of our other findings. We discovered numerous instances of humans treating potentially lethal situations as what they call minor inconveniences. There was one case where a human was impaled through the torso and their primary concern was meeting a project deadline at their place of employment. The professor's skin rippled with what might have been either amusement or existential dread. Ah, yes, the famous, "it's just a flesh wound" phenomenon. Humans have a remarkable capacity for minimizing their injuries, often to a degree that terrifies their medical professionals. A new student raised an appendage. But surely there must be some biological or evolutionary advantage to this behavior. Some logical explanation? Professor Cathra's sensory stalks waved in what the class had learned was her equivalent of a shrug. One might assume so, but human behavior often defies conventional evolutionary logic. They frequently engage in activities that have no survival benefit whatsoever, simply because they were told they couldn't do it, or because they thought it would be, in their words, funny. The display showed a series of human athletic achievements labeled "Hold My Beer" moments. In fact, the professor continued, humans have a peculiar tendency to become more determined when faced with impossible odds. Tell a human something cannot be done, and they are likely to attempt it purely to prove you wrong. Their entire species appears to run on a combination of curiosity, defiance, and what they call caffeine. Melix's spots pulsed with sudden realization. Is that why the Galactic Council added that special clause to the First Contact protocols? The one that specifically prohibits telling humans that something is impossible? Precisely. Professor Cathra's skin shifted to a serious shade of purple. After several incidents where humans accomplished supposedly impossible feats, simply because someone said they couldn't, it was decided that the safer approach was to never challenge their limitations directly. A quiet ripple of understanding moved through the classroom. Several students could be seen making notes about avoiding any accidental dares when dealing with humans. But what about pain? Another student asked. Even if they can push through it, surely they must experience it the same way other species do. Professor Cathra brought up a new set of neural scans. Actually, this is where it gets even more interesting. Humans do feel pain, often quite intensely. They've simply developed an unprecedented ability to compartmentalize it, ignore it, or even use it as motivation. There are documented cases of humans turning their pain response into what they call angry determination. The display showed a human athlete completing a competition despite a severe injury, their face set in what the professor's notes labeled as the look of spite. In conclusion, Melix said, their spots pulsing with academic excitement, our research suggests that humans possess a unique combination of physiological and psychological traits that allow them to endure and even thrive in conditions that would incapacitate most other species. Their ability to continue functioning despite clear biological indicators of damage appears to be powered by a mixture of complex hormonal responses, psychological resilience, and what many of our research subjects simply described as sheer fucking willpower. The classroom was silent for a moment as the implications sank in. Finally, a small voice from the back asked, "Professor, is it true what they say, that humans actually engage in voluntary physical combat as a recreational activity?" Professor Cathra's skin rippled with what might have been amusement. Ah, you're referring to their martial arts. Yes, humans not only voluntarily practice fighting techniques, but they've developed hundreds of different styles and traditions around it. They even have something called boxing, where they repeatedly strike each other in the head for entertainment and profit. A collective shudder went through the classroom. But perhaps the most telling example, the professor continued, is a human recreational activity called rugby. I should warn you, the following footage may be disturbing. The holographic display showed a human sporting event. Several students immediately activated their emergency shields. Others began emitting stress molecules. As you can see, Professor Krathos narrated as the footage played. The human participants are repeatedly engaging in high-speed collisions, falling onto hard surfaces, and sustaining what should be serious injuries. Note how this player has clearly broken several bones, and yet they appear to be arguing with the medical staff about staying in the game. Melix's spots pulsed with a mixture of horror and fascination. Professor, our research also uncovered something called ultramarathons. Could you explain why humans would choose to run until their toenails fall off? Ah. The professor's skin shifted to what the class recognized as her lecture color. That brings us to another fascinating aspect of human behavior. Their concept of challenging themselves. Humans have this peculiar drive to test their limits, often in ways that seem completely irrational to outside observers. The display showed humans participating in various extreme sports and endurance events. They call it pushing their boundaries, Professor Krathos explained. Humans regularly engage in activities that cause them deliberate discomfort or pain, simply to prove to themselves that they can. They even have a saying, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Though I should note that many of their medical professionals strongly disagree with this philosophy. A student near the front raised an appendage. But Professor, according to these readings, many of these activities are causing actual physical damage to their bodies. How can they consider this recreational? That's where human psychology becomes particularly interesting, the professor replied. They have developed something they call endorphins. Natural chemicals their bodies produce in response to pain and exertion. Many humans become what they term addicted to these chemicals, leading them to seek out increasingly challenging physical activities. The display shifted to show a human rock climbing without safety equipment. This behavior, Professor Krathos continued, combined with their remarkable healing capabilities and their previously mentioned tendency towards spite-driven determination, has made humans one of the most formidable species in the galaxy, despite their relatively fragile physical form. Melix's spots pulsed with a new question. Is this why the Galactic Defense Force has that special protocol for human soldiers? The one that says, if a human unit reports they are fine, immediately send medical support regardless of their protests? Exactly. The professor's skin rippled with approval. Humans have a tendency to dramatically understate their injuries. Their military historians have documented numerous cases of soldiers continuing to fight despite wounds that would incapacitate most species. There's even a famous incident where a human soldier, shot through the chest, insisted he was just a bit winded, and continued to defend his position for several hours. The classroom erupted in a mixture of horrified squeaks, crystalline resonances of disbelief, and the soft plop of several gelatinous students fainting. But perhaps most remarkably, Professor Krathos continued, once order was restored. Humans have developed entire cultural practices around deliberately inducing pain for aesthetic purposes. They call it body modification. The next series of images caused several students to activate their emergency evacuation protocols. As you can see, humans willingly allow others to pierce their flesh with metal objects, inject pigments under their skin in a process called tattooing, and even deliberately scar themselves for decorative purposes. Many of them describe the experience as fun or relaxing. A crystalline student chimed in distress. Professor, my neural matrices cannot compute this behavior. Are you suggesting humans deliberately seek out pain for non-survival purposes? In many cases, yes. Professor Krathos' skin shifted to what the class recognized as her "this is not a joke" color. They even have recreational eating competitions where they consume substances that cause intense pain to their digestive systems. The winner is often the one who can endure the most suffering while maintaining what they call a game face. Melix's spots pulsed with sudden understanding. Is this why the Galactic Council added humans to the absolutely do not attempt to conquer list? Because they just don't stop? Precisely. The professor's skin rippled with approval. Early attempts by various species to subjugate humanity quickly discovered that humans tend to respond to oppression by becoming, in their words, really fucking mad about it. Their capacity for endurance, combined with their tendency to become more determined when faced with adversity, makes them particularly dangerous opponents. The display showed historical footage of human resistance movements, causing several students to emit fear pheromones. In conclusion, Professor Krathos said, her skin settling into a scholarly shade of blue, human pain tolerance and endurance capabilities remain one of the most fascinating and terrifying subjects in xenobiology. Their ability to continue functioning despite severe physical trauma, combined with their psychological tendency to respond to pain with increased determination, makes them unique among known species. She paused, allowing her sensory stalks to sweep across the classroom. This is why the standard protocol for dealing with injured humans is to assume they are understating the severity of their condition by at least 60%. It's also why human medical professionals have developed what they call a pain scale, though I should note that human patients frequently argue with this scale, insisting that clearly life-threatening injuries are only a 3 or 4. The professor's skin shifted to her concluding lecture color. Remember, if you ever find yourself in a situation involving human medical care, always assume they are more severely injured than they claim. And never, under any circumstances, tell a human that something is impossible. The resulting attempt to prove you wrong might rewrite our understanding of physical laws, again. As the class began to file out, still processing the disturbing implications of human physiology, Melix lingered behind. Their spots pulsed with one final question. "Professor," they asked hesitantly, "is it true what they say about human mothers? That they can temporarily gain super strength if their offspring are in danger?" Professor Kethra's skin rippled with what might have been a smile. "Ah, the famous mom strength phenomenon. That's actually the subject of next week's lecture. Human parental responses, or why we don't mess with their kids. I suggest you come prepared with your emergency comfort objects. It's going to be a particularly unsettling class." As Melix hurried out, their spots pulsing with anticipatory anxiety, they couldn't help but feel grateful that humans had decided to join the Galactic Federation as allies rather than opponents. The alternative, they realized, would have been entirely too terrifying to contemplate. After all, any species that could look at a broken bone protruding through their skin and respond with, "'Tis but a scratch," was not a species to be trifled with. The next day, as Melix was reviewing their notes in the university's central atrium, they noticed something peculiar. A human exchange student was casually sipping a beverage that, according to their scanner, was hot enough to cause serious burns to most species' oral cavities. "Excuse me." Melix's spots pulsed with curiosity. "But isn't that painful?" The human, Sarah according to her nameplate, looked up with a smile. "Oh, the coffee? Nah, it's not too bad. Could actually be a bit hotter, to be honest." Melix's sensory appendages twisted in confusion. "But my readings indicate the liquid is nearly at your species' pain threshold for thermal damage." Sarah shrugged, a gesture Melix had learned indicated casual dismissal. "Yeah, probably. But you know what they say. It's not really coffee unless it's hot enough to make you question your life choices." "I don't understand," Melix admitted, their spots pulsing with academic interest. "Why would you deliberately consume something that causes discomfort?" "First of all," Sarah grinned, taking another sip, "bold of you to assume I can feel anything before my third cup of coffee. Second, have you tried human coffee? The taste is totally worth a slightly scorched tongue." As if to demonstrate, she took an even bigger gulp of the steaming liquid. Melix's biological sensors went haywire. But, according to my research, you must be experiencing at least a level 6 on your species' pain scale." Sarah actually laughed at that. "Oh, sweet summer child. Wait until you hear about how we eat ice cream. Sometimes we get this thing called brain freeze, and just power through it because the ice cream is too good to stop." Melix felt their spots involuntarily shift to the color of academic distress. "You voluntarily continue consuming something that causes cranial pain?" "Of course. I mean, what's a little brain freeze compared to the joy of devouring a triple chocolate sundae in under 5 minutes? Sarah paused thoughtfully. "Though I guess you might also want to add that to your research. We sometimes eat frozen treats so fast we hurt ourselves, just because we're excited about eating them." Melix quickly activated their recording appendage. This was definitely going in their thesis. "Oh hey," Sarah perked up. If you're interested in human pain tolerance, you should come watch our intramural sports tournament this weekend. Nothing quite like seeing a bunch of sleep-deprived engineering students playing full-contact sports while hopped up on energy drinks. Energy drinks? Melix queried, their spots pulsing with a mixture of horror and fascination. Yeah, you know, caffeine, taurine, probably some stuff that shouldn't be legal. Makes your heart feel like it's trying to escape through your ribs. But hey, that project isn't going to finish itself at 3 a.m., right? Melix made a mental note to update their research section on human chemical tolerances. And you consume these substances voluntarily? Voluntarily? Hell, we pay good money for them. Sarah checked her communication device. Speaking of which, I need another coffee. This one's gotten too cold to properly scald my taste buds. Want to come along? The campus cafe just got this new blend that they describe as aggressive. Should be fun. As Melix followed their human classmate, recording appendage still active, they couldn't help but think that Professor Cathra had understated just how terrifyingly casual humans were about their pain tolerance. They made a mental note to add a new section to their thesis. Human recreational chemistry, when probably dangerous, means challenge accepted. The cafe, it turned out, was an educational experience in itself. Melix watched in fascinated horror as Sarah and several other human students casually consumed beverages at temperatures that their species guide described as approaching plasma state. You know what would go great with this? One human said to another. Those ghost pepper chips from yesterday. Dude, those were awesome. My taste buds are still mad at me, but totally worth it. Melix's spots pulsed with academic confusion. You enjoyed food that damaged your sensory organs? Damaged is a strong word, Sarah chimed in. I prefer to think of it as spice training, like building up an immunity to iocane powder, except with more hiccups and crying. That's not how biology works, Melix protested weakly. Tell that to my grandmother, another human student laughed. She's been eating increasingly spicy food for 70 years, and now regular peppers taste like bell peppers to her. Actually made a rookie mistake last week and tried to match her tolerance. Pretty sure I saw through time. Through time? Yeah, you know, when something's so spicy that your body decides pain is now an out-of-body experience. Good times. Melix's recording appendage was working overtime. Their thesis was quickly evolving from a standard xenobiology study into what felt like a documentary on voluntary human endurance challenges. Oh, hey. Sarah suddenly remembered something. If you're interested in human pain tolerance, you should definitely come to the Hot Wings Challenge next week. It's this thing where we compete to see who can eat the spiciest chicken wings without crying or drinking milk. Why would you... What's the purpose of such a competition? Purpose? Sarah looked genuinely confused. I mean, the winner gets their picture on the wall of flame and a t-shirt that says, I made poor life choices at Dave's Wing Shack. Plus bragging rights, obviously. You endure extreme pain for a piece of clothing and social recognition? And bragging rights, Sarah emphasized. Don't forget the bragging rights. Also, the endorphin rush is pretty amazing once you can feel your face again. As Melix accompanied their human classmates through their daily routines, they began to understand why Professor Cathra had warned them about the complexity of human pain responses. It wasn't just that humans could endure pain. They had somehow turned pain tolerance into a recreational activity, a social bonding exercise, and what appeared to be a bizarre form of entertainment. Their observation notes for the day included such gems as, human student completed physical training routine despite clear indicators of muscle fatigue. When questioned, responded with, pain is just weakness leaving the body. Require clarification on whether humans actually believe weakness has physical form. Witnessed human walking on injured foot. When concerned classmate pointed out limping, human responded, walk it off. Unclear if humans believe locomotion cures injury, or if this is another example of their spite-based healing. Observed human student continuing to play recreational sphere-based game after collision that briefly rendered them unconscious. Medical intervention was suggested, but refused with phrase, rub some dirt on it. Require further research on human belief in therapeutic properties of soil. By the end of the day, Melix had enough material for 3 theses and a growing suspicion that humans were either the most resilient or the most reckless species in the galaxy. Possibly both. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Sarah called out, Hey, Don't forget about next week's lecture on human emergency medical responses. I'm giving a presentation on the time. I finished a marathon with a broken foot because, and I quote my doctor on this, I was too stubborn to recognize basic survival instincts. Melix's spots pulsed with a mixture of horror and academic excitement. Their thesis was definitely going to need a new chapter on human medical professionals, and their apparently ongoing battle with their patients' determination to ignore basic biological limitations. As they made their way back to their dormitory, Melix couldn't help but reflect on how humans had managed to survive as a species. Any rational analysis would suggest that a species with such a casual disregard for their own physical well-being should have gone extinct long ago. Instead, they had somehow turned their pain tolerance into an evolutionary advantage, developed social customs around it, and were now casually sharing their experiences over beverages hot enough to melt standard containment units. Perhaps, Melix thought, that was the real lesson here. Humans hadn't just adapted to cope with pain. They had somehow managed to turn it into a source of pride, a social activity, and occasionally, a reason to create commemorative t-shirts. Their final note for the day read, Conclusion. Human pain tolerance appears to be less about physical capability, and more about what one human described as the audacity to tell physics and biology to take a seat. Further research required, pending development of stronger observation shields and stress management protocols for xenobiology students. 1 week later, Melix found themselves in what humans called a hospital emergency room. They hadn't planned on conducting field research today, but Sarah had insisted they come along after her roommate had what she called a minor skateboarding incident. Minor? Melix's spots pulsed with distress as they examined their readings. Your friend collided with a solid object while traveling at considerable velocity. The injured human, Jamie, was sitting casually in a chair, holding an ice pack to their head and typing one-handed on their communication device. Yeah, but I totally stuck the landing. I mean, technically I stuck to the pavement, but still. You have multiple abrasions, possible concussion indicators, and... Melix's sensory stalks twisted in confusion as they checked their scanner again. A displaced shoulder joint? Oh, is that what that grinding noise is? Jamie looked mildly interested. Cool. Hey Sarah, can you take a video when they pop it back in? For my TikTok? Melix's spots shifted to their academic distress color. You want to document a medical procedure for entertainment purposes? Well, yeah. Jamie shrugged with their good shoulder. My followers love that kind of content. You should have seen the views I got when I broke my ankle doing parkour last year. The X-ray went viral. Sarah nodded sagely. It was pretty impressive. You could totally see where the bone went all. She made a gesture that caused Melix to emit involuntary stress pheromones. Humans intentionally share images of their injuries for social media engagement? Melix activated their recording appendage. This was definitely going in the thesis appendix on human social behaviors. Sir? The medical professional's voice carried the peculiar mix of patience and exasperation that Melix was beginning to recognize as standard for their profession. You have a wound that needs immediate attention. Yeah, but it's just a flesh wound. Sir, I can see your tendons. Walk it off? That's not how tendons work. What if I just wrap it in duct tape? Melix's recording appendage was working overtime. The interaction perfectly illustrated their thesis section on human injury classification systems, particularly the apparent disconnect between medical professional assessments and patient self-evaluation. Their research notes were expanding by the minute. Human pain scale appears to be more of a suggestion than a diagnostic tool. Patient rated clearly severe injury as 3-10-4 if I poke it. Medical professional responded with expressions suggesting this is standard behavior. Multiple instances of humans attempting to minimize clearly significant injuries. Common phrases include, just a scratch, had worse, and the apparently ritualistic, you should see the other guy. Observed fascinating phenomenon where humans gather to compare injury stories, each attempting to downplay their own while expressing appropriate concern for others. Possible social bonding ritual? As they were leaving the emergency room, after Jamie had secured both their social media content and a stern lecture from the medical staff about the importance of protective equipment, Melix found themselves developing a new appreciation for human medical professionals. It must be challenging, they commented to Sarah, for your healers to treat a species that actively resists their own survival instincts. Sarah laughed. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you hear about the time my dad tried to convince an emergency room doctor that he could sleep off a clearly broken arm because he had an important meeting the next day. Did the medical professional manage to convince him otherwise? Nope. Mom had to physically sit on him to keep him from leaving. He still insisted on doing the meeting via video call from his hospital bed, claiming the cast was just a fashion accessory. Melix's spots pulsed with a new understanding. Is this why your species' medical facilities appear to be designed with patient restraint in mind? That, and because apparently telling a human you need to rest is basically challenging them to immediately attempt parkour. Sarah grinned. There's a reason most recovery rooms have window locks. As they made their way back to campus, Melix couldn't help but reflect on how their research had evolved. What had started as a simple study of human pain tolerance had become an increasingly complex exploration of human psychology, social dynamics, and what appeared to be a species-wide resistance to common sense. Their final note for the day read, Update to thesis title, Human Pain Response, a comprehensive study of a species that treats medical advice as optional and physics as a personal challenge. Addendum. Consider adding section on human medical professionals and their apparently evolved resistance to patient logic. The following day, Melix found themselves in what humans called a gym, apparently a dedicated facility where humans voluntarily subjected themselves to physical stress for recreational purposes. Sarah had insisted they come along to gather more data for their research. This, Sarah announced proudly, gesturing at the array of mechanical devices that appeared to be designed specifically for inducing muscle strain, is where we come to get swole. Melix's translator struggled with the last word. Swole. You know, buff, ripped, jacked. Each synonym seemed to confuse their translator further. We lift heavy things repeatedly until our muscles get bigger. But Melix's spots pulsed with confusion. According to my readings, these activities are literally causing microscopic tears in your muscle fibers. Yeah, that's kind of the point, a nearby human called out while lifting what appeared to be several times their body weight. No pain, no gain. Melix quickly added another note to their research. Humans have developed philosophical mantras to justify voluntary self-induced trauma. Further investigation needed into possible connection with collective species madness. Their attention was drawn to a human who appeared to be in distress, making strained noises while attempting to lift a heavy object. Should we help them? Melix's spots pulsed with concern. Nah, that's just Dave hitting a new PR, Sarah explained. Those are his happy grunts. Happy grunts? Yeah, you can tell because he's turning that special shade of purple that means he's really feeling the burn. Melix's sensory appendages twisted in horror. Your species experiences burning sensations as positive feedback? Well, yeah. How else would you know it's working? Sarah started doing something she called warm-up stretches that made Melix's exoskeleton cringe in sympathy. Oh, hey, you should stick around for the CrossFit class. That's when things get really interesting. CrossFit? It's like regular exercise, except you do it as intensely as possible while a coach yells encouragement, and everyone lies on the floor afterward questioning their life choices. Just then, a human across the room let out a victory cry that caused several other species to activate their emergency shields. The human had apparently succeeded in lifting a particularly heavy object, and was now celebrating by immediately attempting to lift an even heavier one. Is that safe? Melix asked. Probably not, Sarah shrugged. But that's why we have spotters and really good health insurance. The next hour was a blur of observations that had Melix's recording appendage working overtime. Human subjects repeatedly lift heavy objects until muscle failure, then express disappointment at not being able to lift more. Possible correlation with species' documented difficulty in recognizing physical limitations. Observed phenomenon of counting reps. Humans appear to have ritualistic number of times they must lift object before considering activity complete. Failure to reach target number often results in visible distress and self-imposed penalty exercises. Multiple instances of humans encouraging each other to push through the pain require further research into whether humans believe pain is some form of dimensional barrier that can be physically traversed. The arrival of the CrossFit class provided even more fascinating data. Melix watched in horror as humans voluntarily participated in what appeared to be some form of organized chaos. They're doing something called burpees now, Sarah explained as they watched. It's like a push-up had a baby with jumping jacks, and that baby hates you personally. But Why? Excellent cardio, great for building endurance, and it makes you question every decision that led you to this moment. Sarah grinned. Plus, it's fun to do them until you taste colors. Melek's spots pulsed with academic distress. Your species associates hallucinations with entertainment? Only the exercise-induced ones. Though you should see what happens when someone gets their runner's high during a marathon. Had a friend who swears she had a philosophical debate with a tree at mile 23. Their notes continued to grow. Humans have developed specific clothing for exercise that appears designed to maximize rather than minimize discomfort. Subject described compression shorts as comfortably uncomfortable, require linguistic analysis of this apparently contradictory term. Observed multiple humans comparing what they call personal bests, apparent competition to achieve maximum self-induced suffering. Winner appears to be determined by combination of weight lifted and dramatic sound effects produced. Documentation of human protein shake consumption. Subjects willingly ingest substances described as tasting like sweetened chalk because gains. Further research needed into definition of gains and its relationship to voluntary suffering. The day took an even more interesting turn when they witnessed something called a plank challenge. Current record holder is at 17 minutes, Sarah explained as they watched humans trembling in a position that seemed designed specifically to activate every muscle group simultaneously. But their cores are clearly experiencing severe strain, Melek protested. The muscle fatigue indicators are off the charts. Yeah, Gary's really gunning for that 20-minute mark. He says he's going to beat Karen from accounting if it kills him. If it kills him? Figure of speech, mostly. Though Karen did almost pass out last week trying to defend her record. Had to be carried to the water fountain, but she still held her plank for 18 minutes. Melek added another note. Humans appear to value arbitrary exercise goals over basic biological functions such as consciousness. Possible connection to previously documented spite-based achievement phenomenon. As they were preparing to leave, they witnessed one final example of human exercise culture that would require an entirely new chapter in their thesis. A group of humans were gathering for something called hot yoga. They're going to do yoga in artificially elevated temperatures? Melek's spots pulsed with disbelief. Oh yeah, it's great, Sarah enthused. Nothing like doing downward dog in a room that feels like the surface of Mercury. Really helps with flexibility. No idea. But you sweat so much you forget to care about why you're doing it. It's very zen. Melek watched as humans voluntarily entered a room heated well beyond comfortable parameters to perform complex physical poses while deliberately controlling their breathing. Their final note for the day read, humans have successfully combined multiple forms of physical stress into single activities, apparently operating under the principle that if one form of discomfort is beneficial, multiple simultaneous forms must be even better. Beginning to suspect entire species has evolved to run on combination of endorphins and questionable logic. As they made their way back to their dormitory, Sarah casually mentioned their plans for the weekend. A bunch of us are doing this thing called a mud run on Saturday. It's like a regular running race, except you also crawl through mud, climb over walls, and sometimes get mildly electrocuted. Melek's spots pulsed with horror. Electrocuted? Just a little bit. It's super fun. Want to come watch? I think I need to update my research protocols to include psychological analysis, Melek replied weakly, and possibly invest in stronger recording equipment. Fair enough, Sarah grinned, but you're going to miss seeing us do the fire jump at the finish line. The fire jump? Oh yeah, they set up this thing where you have to jump over actual flames to finish the race. Makes for great photos. Melek's spots shifted to a previously undocumented color of academic despair. Their thesis was definitely going to need a new section on human recreational danger-seeking behaviors, and their apparently complete disconnect from survival instincts. The end.